Well, hi there. Fancy seeing you here once again. Here we are once again at the Alpha Male 2.0 podcast. And as always, I am Caleb Jones, at least the last time I checked. Today, I'm going to give you a core philosophy that I have used in my adult life. This is one of the baseline, fundamental core philosophies of my entire life. I have based much of my life on this. I have based how I run my businesses based on this philosophy. I have used this philosophy as a basis for how I date and interact with women and other people in my life. This philosophy is a very core building block of Alpha Male 2.0, and it's actually one of the seeds of Alpha Male 2.0. Alpha Male 2.0 grew out of this philosophy and some other philosophies that I have. This is also the basis of my political views and my political philosophies, my life philosophy. So much of my life and my overall philosophy revolves around this very basic, simple concept, and that is the concept called natural law. And natural law is not a physical law. It is not like the law of gravity. It is not a scientific law. As a matter of fact, some left-wingers, when you talk about natural law, will immediately point out, well, that's really, there's no scientific basis in that. Correct. It is not a scientific law. It is a philosophical law. It is a philosophy. It is not a science. There's no science behind this. It's basically a philosophy, just like any other philosophy. Science is one thing, philosophy is another. Now, it is rooted in a lot of reality and a lot of objective reality, as I will explain as I go along. But natural law, if I were to summarize it in its most simple form, is that you own you. And not only do you own you, you own 100% of you. No one else owns you. You own 100% of you. And that means that when I say no one else, that means your parents, that means your wife or your girlfriend, that means your children. None of these people own you. Now, I will make a slight exception to that. If you're under the age of 18, if you're a child, that's a little different because children do not have full agency about them. They don't have full freedom. Therefore, they don't have full responsibility. So you could make the argument that if you're under the age of 18, your parents do own you to a degree. I'm talking here about legal adults, age 18 and above, or whatever it is in your country. So I'm exempting people under the age of 18. But if you're an adult, your parents do not own you. And it's not just individuals that don't own you. It's also your society. Your society does not own you at all. You own you and no one else owns you. So when I say you, that breaks down into several categories. Number one, you own your body. No one else owns your body. You own your body. So if you want to smoke weed, if you want to snort heroin, if you want to drink poison and kill yourself, this should all be allowed because you own you. It's your body. You can do whatever you want with it. This is why I'm against all drug laws. All drug laws. As a libertarian, I think all drugs should be legal. Does that mean I think drugs are a good thing? No, and if you know my content, I am vehemently anti-drug. I have never done drugs in my entire life. I have never been drunk in my entire life. I think drugs are amazingly stupid in most cases. I think drugs make an already difficult life more difficult. So I'm against drugs, but philosophically, if you want to take drugs, you should be allowed to do that because guess what? I don't own you. You own you. So for me to make a law and say you can't do any drugs would be silly because I don't own you. You own you. If you want to kill yourself or fuck up your own body, that's your decision because your body belongs to 100% you and no one else. This also means, and this is a core part of Alpha Male 2.0, I can't tell you what to do because I don't own you. You're not my slave. I don't own you. You own 100% of you. And I own 100% of me. So I can't tell you what to do. I don't own you. You can do whatever you want. Now, that also means you can't tell me what to do because you don't own me. Ooh. See, people love the concept of having someone in their life who doesn't tell them what to do. But as soon as you say to these same people, well, that means you can't tell me what to do, they go, oh, I don't like that. Fuck. So natural law cuts both ways. I own 100% of me and I own 0% of you. And I've talked to women about this, how if you're going to be in a relationship with an Alpha Male 2.0, the great news is he's never going to tell you what to do because he follows natural law. You do whatever you want. But the problem is, the price you pay for that is that, you can't tell him what to do, ever. And he can do whatever he wants, including fuck other women. See, there's a pro and a con to this whole thing. Now, we can extend this out. If you own 100% of you, that means you own 100% of the fruits and the results of your own labor. For example, if I hire you to do some work for 8 hours in a given day, and I pay you a mutually agreed upon amount of money, let's just say it's $100 for easy math. Let's say you and I come to an agreement. You're going to do 8 hours of work for this particular thing you're going to do in a given day, and I'm going to pay you $100. That means that at the end of the day, assuming you did the work and I pay you that $100, who does that $100 belong to? It belongs to you 100%. It doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to your mom. It doesn't belong to your wife. It doesn't belong to your girlfriend. It doesn't belong to your daughter or your son. It belongs to you. That $100 is 100% yours because you did 100% of that labor. Now, let's say instead of doing that 8-hour labor, you had your buddy help you, and he did 4 hours of work and you did 4 hours of work. Well, then it would make sense that he gets $50 and you get $50. Again, because you don't own your friend and he doesn't own you. But here's where this gets a little more complicated. When I say no one owns you except you, that includes society. So that means that society doesn't own any of that $100. It all goes to you. This is why I'm against the entire concept of income taxes. Because income taxes says, you know what? Actually, natural law is bullshit. We don't believe in this. You actually don't own 100% of you. You own about 40% of you, or 50% of you, or 60% of you. Society owns some percentage of you. And it depends on who you talk to. If it's a traditional conservative, it might be 25%. If it's a far left-wing socialist, it might be 70%. So in both cases, these people are going to say, okay, that $100, I'm sorry, society gets 40% of that, $40 or $30 or $50. Sorry, it's the way it goes because society kind of owns you a little bit. I'm against this concept. You should pay literally 0% in income taxes. Why? Because 100% of that work was done by you, so 100% of the result of that work should be given to you. Now, the counter argument to that is, and a left-winger will bring this up, and they're correct when they bring this up, they will say, now, wait a second. You can't say that society gets 0% of that $100 because in order to do your job, you got in your car and you had to drive across town to the location to where you did this work. And that means you used public roads. You used the commons. So we have a right to take money from you based on the fact that you used the public commons. Now, that is correct. You did use the public commons, most likely, to earn that money, even if it was the internet, even if it was roads, even if it was the fact that you benefit from police protection or fire protection or army protection or what have you. So that's accurate. But as I've talked about many times on my blogs, when I used to write political articles, and I don't anymore and I won't, but as I've shown many times, the amount of money in taxes that the commons costs you is a very, very teeny tiny fraction of your income. It's not 30 or 40 or 50 or 70%. If you look at all spending in the United States, for example, in terms of infrastructure and how much money actually goes to roads, what percent of taxes actually go to roads, it's 1%. Right, so what should happen, and I've talked about this before in my old blog posts, where you should receive a bill from your local government that is a commons bill. So you use the roads, you use the library, you benefited from police protection, so here's a bill, please pay this bill, it's a few $100. It's not 30% of your fucking income, or 40%, or 60%, or 70%, or whatever the fuck. It's a bill you would pay like anything else that you should pay, yes. But that doesn't mean that the government or society owns you. You still own 100% of you, and you have to pay some entity, if that's government or private industry, doesn't matter, from the things you use and the things you benefit from, like using roads, like benefiting from the fact we have an army to protect the borders, and so on. So that's the political angle. Let's get back into your life. So as an alpha male 2.0, I follow natural law. And that means whenever I work with anyone, whenever I interact with anyone, whenever I have sex with a woman, whenever I work with someone on my staff, whenever I interact with people who are my friends or family members or customers, I follow natural law. This means that these people do not own me at all, not even 1%. And I don't own these people at all, not even 1%. But Kayla, what about your employees? What about people who work for you? I don't own them. We have entered into a mutually agreed upon arrangement where I pay them X dollars and they return Y work. That is a mutually beneficial arrangement I've entered in with these people of whom I don't own and they don't own me. Same thing if I'm in a relationship with a woman. And that doesn't matter if it's a casual relationship like an FB, or a dating relationship like an MLTR, or a serious relationship like an OLTR, or a married relationship like a married OLTR, which I have. In all those cases, I don't own that woman. So let's take the most extreme example is when you're married under an Alpha Male 2.0 model. I am married. I have an OLTR marriage. And my wife, Pink Firefly, is a woman who I don't own. I don't own her at all. Not even 1%. She is free to do literally whatever she wants at any time without my permission. She can do whatever she wants and I can never tell her what to do. Kayla, that's insane. How does that work? Well, you could go get my book at open-marriage.com on how to structure a non-monogamous marriage, OLTR marriage. You can learn about exactly how to do that and why it works so well. But the point is, I can't tell her what to do and she can't tell me what to do. She can do literally whatever she wants, including if she wanted to, she doesn't, but if she wanted to, have sex with other men. She could even do that. She could, because I don't own her. See how this works? Now, does that mean that if she does anything she wants and she does things that I hate, I'm going to put up with it? No, because I own 100% of me. So if my wife were to suddenly do some things that I completely disagree with, let's say she started doing heavy drugs. Let's say she started getting drunk every night. Let's say she started robbing banks. Let's say, here's a more easy one, she started giving me drama. I don't do drama. So let's say she started giving me drama all the time. Started yelling and screaming at me and shit. Let's say in terms of fucking other guys, she would never do this. She's in her 40s and, she's an appropriate lady. But let's say she were to go to random bars at night and just hook up with random dudes without wearing a condom and do that, fuck 20 guys without a condom. Let's say she did something like that. Any of these things, I have the right to control me. So I can tell her, hey, you are doing these things. I don't like that you're doing these things. I don't want to be with someone who does these things. Goodbye. And then I would end the marriage and move on and go find another woman who was more compatible with my desires and my lifestyle. You see how this works? This is Alpha Male 2.0 relationship models in a nutshell, really. The Alpha Male doesn't tell women what to do because he doesn't own these women. Instead, he says, you can do literally whatever you want, whenever you want. And if you do a whole bunch of things that I really don't like, I'm not going to spend time with you. And instead, I'm going to go spend time with other women who do the things that I like and don't do the things that I don't like, which is perfectly fine. No hard feelings. Not everyone is compatible with everyone else, but I'm never going to tell you what to do. And on the flip side, sweetheart, you can't tell me what to do. Ever. Never. My wife can never tell me what to do. Ever. No woman I've ever dated since becoming Alpha Male 2.0 14 years ago can ever tell me, nor has ever told me what to do. You can't tell me what to do. So if I do things you don't like, you have a decision to make, don't you? You could bring it to my attention quietly and calmly in a spirit of cooperation and collaboration. Hey, Caleb, you know what? I really don't like it when you do X, Y, and Z. And that's fine. And I might say to you, hey, you know what? Good point. I won't do that anymore. Or I could say, you know what? I'm sorry. That's how I am. I'm going to do that the rest of my life. If you don't like it, you have a decision to make. And in that scenario, and by the way, that would usually be my answer. But in that scenario, the woman then has a decision to make. Do you want to stay with this man who does these things you hate or who are irritating or that you don't like? Or you want to leave him and find a different guy? What do you want to do? Because he's an Alpha Male 2.0, you can't tell him what to do because of natural law. She doesn't own you, not even 1%, and you don't own her, not even 1%. And when you have a relationship like that, guess what? You don't fight. You don't have drama. You don't have big, giant, screaming arguments. I didn't say you never disagree. Human beings can disagree. I'm saying you don't have drama like typical relationships, because in typical relationships, they take natural law. As soon as they start to really like each other, they take natural law and they throw it out the window. And the man says to the woman, or the woman says to the man, okay, here are the rules you must now follow because I want you to do X, Y, and Z. Because now that we're having sex and now that we like each other, and certainly if we've committed to monogamy, which is insane and stupid, I own you. I fucking own at least a piece of you, and you own a piece of me. That's the core concept behind traditional monogamous marriage, but it's behind most relationships. Most relationships between men and women are based on the concept, even if they don't say it, even if they don't actually say it this way, but it's true, that the man owns the woman at least somewhat, and the woman owns the man at least somewhat. Therefore, if you own this person, or at least partially own this person, you have the right, quote unquote, to tell this person what to do. And this person better fucking do what they're told. This is classic Alpha Male 1.0. And in terms of women, this is classic dominant. There are three kinds of women: dominants, submissives, and independents. I've talked about those in my blogs. Just like there are three kinds of men: alpha 2.0, alpha 1.0, and beta male. And in traditional relationships, you have, quote, the right to tell that person what to do. And they, quote, have the right to tell you what to do. And if you don't like what this person tells you, you're going to fight. You're going to have arguments. You're going to have problems. You're going to have drama. Or, which is more often the case, if you tell this person what to do and then they nod their head and agree, and then down the road they don't do it. For example, here's the easiest one. We're in a monogamous relationship right now, so you are never allowed to get sexual with any other person besides me. And the person says, okay, right. And they kind of roll their eyes. If it's an alpha male 1.0, he's like, yeah, sure, And he rolls his eyes. If it's a beta male, he goes, oh, okay, yeah, okay, I won't. And in both cases, men are men. Eventually he cheats, and then she finds out, and then there's an explosion. Or in some cases, maybe she cheats and he finds out, and then there's a drama explosion. Because people are not robots. People don't do what they're told. I don't know if you've noticed. I don't know if you've ever dated a woman before, but people don't exactly do what they're told. And that applies to you as well. Have you followed 100% every parameter, every relationship rule, every woman you've ever dated or been in a relationship with has given you? Of course not. So when you don't follow natural law, you will automatically incur a life of drama, disagreements, conflict, and societally, anger, high taxes, lots of laws, lots of bullshit. And unfortunately, natural law is not followed by the vast, vast majority of the world. The vast majority of planet Earth completely disagree with everything I've just described in this podcast. The vast majority of human beings, including right-wing conservatives, will say, no, society does own a percentage of you, and society does have the right to tell you what to do. Left-wingers will say things like, hey, we're all in this together, and we're all one people, and socialism, communism, Marxism, kumbaya. Right-wing conservatives, particularly religious conservatives, will say, well, no, we have to have standards. You can't just go around having sex with whomever you want and gambling and jerking off to porn. These things are evil and wrong because this holy book written 2,000 years ago and has been edited hundreds and hundreds of times since then says so. Therefore, yes, society is going to have to tell you what to do because society does kind of own you a little bit. Now, we don't think it owns you as much as those evil left-wingers. They think society owns 70% of you, and we wonderful conservatives only quote unquote, that society owns 25% of you or 33% of you. I remember the speech that George W. Bush gave many years ago when he was president. This is a right-wing conservative, at least in theory. And in the speech, he said, no person, no American, and no human being should ever be forced to pay more than 1/3 of his income in taxes, which, as I described earlier, is insanity. If you're paying for the services you're actually benefiting from, you're paying 1 or 2 or 3 or 4% in taxes. You're not paying anywhere near 33%. Insanity. So unfortunately, we live in a world where natural law is completely rejected, where natural law makes people completely uncomfortable. And that's because natural law is hand in hand with personal freedom. And unfortunately, we live in an era, and it's not an unusual era, most eras were like this, but we live in an era where freedom, and personal responsibility, it makes women very uncomfortable, at least in the beginning, to get into a relationship with a man who is allowed to fuck other women, and she can't stop him. It makes men very uncomfortable, at least in the beginning, to get into relationships with women where he can't tell these women what to do, and they can go off and do whatever they want when he's not around, and he can't tell her what to do. It makes human beings very uncomfortable to be in a society or a country where the government is really, really, really teeny and tiny and passes almost no laws and has very low taxes and lets people kind of conduct their business on their own because the government knows the government doesn't own these people. Matter of fact, there is no government like that anywhere in the world anymore because the concept of natural law is so uncomfortable for people. So if you are like me and you follow the concept of natural law, you're going to live a very happy life. And it's going to be a really, really wonderful life of a lot of happiness and not a lot of conflict and a lot of freedom. But you're going to be weird. People are going to look at you very strangely because people don't like natural law. You're going to be a very bizarre exception to the rule. That's why I've always talked about how alpha male 2.0 applies maybe to 5% of men and at best applies to maybe 10% of men. Most men are going to disagree with these concepts. Most men who agree with these concepts are not going to have the balls to pursue them. Those would be terrified beta males or very lazy alpha male 1.0s. Even if they come across this content and they nod their head in agreement and say, yeah, this would be great. They're not going to do it. Most guys, they're not going to do the things necessary to adopt this lifestyle because it's just too different. It's just too uncomfortable. It diametrically opposes all of their societal programming because I'm sure what I have just described is not what your parents taught you. I know for a fact it is not what your school taught you. I know for a fact it is not what your religion taught you if you had a religious upbringing. And that's any religion, by the way. There is no religion that I've seen that follows the concept of natural law. Even things like Buddhism embrace a concept of lack and pain and things like that. So this is the diametric opposite to what you've been told your whole life. What you've been told your whole life is society does fucking own at least a percentage of you and should control at least a percentage of you. And when you get into a relationship, that woman does own a percentage of you, and you certainly own a percentage of her. Now, one thing you might say is, well, Caleb, wait a minute. You can't have anarchy. You can't have a society where the government says literally do whatever you want. That is correct. This is why I'm not an anarchist. Instead, I'm a libertarian minarchist, which means I do believe in government as long as you keep it small, local, and decentralized for as long as you can. So the laws that you can pass if you have a government that follows natural law is, or would be, those laws that infringe upon the individual. And frankly, there are only two. There's a thing called basic law. There's only two laws you really need to pass if you follow a society that is based in natural law. Law number one is do not violate anyone's person or property. So don't physically assault anybody, don't trespass on their property, don't steal from them, don't vandalize, don't rape them, don't beat them up. You can't initiate force against people. Do not violate someone's person or property. Very simple. The second law you have is do whatever you promise to do in writing. So if you promise to do something in writing and you sign that piece of paper, you got to do it. And if you don't do it, that other person, that other party can bring you to the government and say, this person didn't do this, and then you'll be in trouble. Those two laws are valid. No other law is valid. And I mean this, no other law is valid if you follow natural law. Any other law that you could come up with is a violation of natural law. Any other law you could come up with is a concept where the government says, you're not hurting anybody, you're minding your own business, but we really want you to do this. And it may even be a law that makes sense to you, like seatbelt laws. Caleb, are you against seatbelt laws? Yes, I'm against seatbelt laws. Now, I wear my seatbelt every time I get into a car. I think you're a fucking moron if you don't wear a seatbelt. But the government can't force you at gunpoint to wear a seatbelt. That's not their role because they don't own you. Remember, you own your body. If you want to take that risk, if you want to drive a car without wearing a seatbelt or drive a motorcycle without wearing a helmet, that's on you. That's your decision. It's your body. Go ahead and kill yourself if you want. Suicide would even be legal under the system because, again, it's your body. You see how this works? By now, you can see how natural law applies to all aspects of my life. It's how I conduct my entire life. It's how I interact with people in my business life. It's how I interact with people in my family. It's how I interact with women I date and have sex with, and it always has, at least since the last 14 years since becoming Alpha 2.0. It influences or actually determines all of my political views. It drives a lot of views I have on international travel, international living, 5 flags, all of these things. A lot of Alpha Male 2.0 stems directly from the concept of natural law. I own 100% of myself. I own 0% of you. You own 100% of yourself. You own 0% of me. And if you want me to do something, you can't tell me to do it. Now, what you can do is try to convince me of doing something. I'm pretty good at that. I'm able to sit down with you and try to convince you, hey, what you really should do is this. And if you choose to do it, great. If you choose not to, great. And that's my problem. And if you want me to do something and you can't convince me to do it, then I won't do it. And that's your fucking problem because you don't own me. You can always go try to convince someone else. And if you're smart and you utilize natural law in an intelligent way, instead what you will do is you will only spend time with people who already want what you want. Isn't that much nicer? That's my entire woman life. I don't go out screening for women. And then once I get into a relationship with a woman, start bossing her around and telling her what to do, knowing that 50 or 40 or 30% of these things I tell her to do, she won't want to do. She'll either fight me or lie to me and do them behind my back. I don't do that. Instead, I go have sex with a bunch of women, and the ones that automatically already, before they ever met me, like exactly what I like, those are the women I spend time with. And if I find one extraordinary one who really likes what I like and works with me very well, then I can settle down with her. That's how I found Pink Firefly. Pink Firefly already does pretty much everything I already like. I don't have to tell her to do anything because she already does pretty much everything I like. Does she do 100% of what I like? Of course not. That's why I've written in my marriage books that when you settle down with someone, and when I say settle down, that's whatever you define it as. If you move in with someone or marry someone or whatever, there's going to be 10% of that person that you're not going to fucking like, and you got to put up with it. And if you don't want to put up with 10% of something that you don't like, you should never live with another woman ever again and just stay single, or at least stay living alone. That's fine too. And that's your decision too. And no one can force you to marry or doing that stuff because they don't own you, but you don't own anyone else. In this podcast, I am not trying to convince you that you should assume the concept of natural law in your life. I think you should. I think it's a really good idea. You'll be much happier. You'll live a much better life. But I'm not trying to convince you. This podcast is more about defining why I believe this and why I follow this philosophy. No, I don't believe it is literally true scientifically, because I know I'll get people who say that, well, there's no scientific basis for this stuff. I'm not talking about scientific basis. I'm talking about a philosophy. And this is why I follow this philosophy. And this philosophy has worked amazingly well in all areas of my life. Financially, my family life, my spiritual life, certainly my woman life. Over the past 14 years, I live a goddamn dream life. And it is because of Alpha Male 2.0, rooted in the concept of natural law. So I know for a fact this stuff works if you have the balls to assume these lifestyle models, and it does take some balls. And a lot of men aren't going to have those balls, and that's fine. But if you have the balls, do it. Assume natural law as your philosophy and pursue Alpha Male 2.0. You will like it, and you will thank me later. I will see you very soon.